Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. In case you don't know much about Larry Fink, who is the head of BlackRock, or in case you don't appreciate how much of a smug prick he is, he helped us out by sitting down for an interview with Bloomberg to talk about ESG, which he is one of the principal advocates of, the environmental, social governance of corporations, turning companies into political actors where they funnel some of their profits to the political left. And they get some return through proper rent-seeking behavior. How's it going, Larry? You okay? All the slings and arrows you've had to suffer for being out and proud in advance of ESG?
Do you think inflation has peaked?
Oh, very much so. I think inflation is going to drop very, very quickly. In fact, I believe many of us will be surprised how quickly it will fall. The problem is it will fall very quickly. Sort of 9 to 4 will be the easy part, and then it's going to get very difficult to get inflation back to price stability. So, but at the moment, I think the initial phase will be a very rapid decline in inflation.
So what does it mean for central banks?
That's not the clip. Having a bit of technical problems here this morning. I apologize. But the essential gist of what Larry Fink had to say was that it's well worth it. It's been overblown. It's been surprising to him, the personal attacks he has suffered. But even though there's been some high-profile pullout of pension fund money from states like Louisiana and Florida to the tune of about $4 billion, worry not, because it's been $4 billion in outflows and $200 billion in inflows in 2022, said Larry Fink. So there's a lot more leftist control of government, and he didn't say it quite these terms, but I'm translating. There's a lot more leftist-controlled government out there that's happy to funnel money to outfits like mine, where we'll in turn funnel some of it back to their favored political initiatives. For more on this, pleased to be joined by Christopher Whalen, investment banker and chairman of Whalen Global Advisors, author of Fordman, From Inspiration to Enterprise, and editor of the Institutional Risk Analyst. Christopher Whalen, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning, Dan. You're talking about one of my favorite subjects. Good morning, Amy.
Yeah, and I'm sure your favorite people, Larry Fink. What a hero.
No, Larry is a twit. He should have shown courage and pushed back, and he didn't. The whole business community has shown a total lack of guts when it comes to ESG. And my friends in the ratings community, Moody's, S&P, KBRA, all of them jumped into the mosh pit with the left. And it's a confused mess. The funny part about ESG is you would never really put any of the components together. But because they had this kind of governance thing going on, they decided to throw the E and the S in there too, and just latch onto it like some kind of a mutant, bacteria.
So speaking of that, I mean, is the genesis of this, then it mutated as you described to ESG? Is the genesis of this like Sarbanes-Oxley?
Basically, yes, in a strange way. We never really implemented Sarbanes-Oxley other than just lip service. But then they decided to staple these new proteins of, environmental and sustainability to what was essentially a corporate governance rule for accounting firms. Okay? That's how strange this is. So, ultimately, like you were describing beautifully, Dan, it took on a life of its own, and the false narrative, whether you talk about environmentalism or electric vehicles or whatever it is, now comes, pouring out of this ESG thing. And I think the only way we kill it is by getting a Republican majority in the Congress and in the White House and ignoring it, just legislate it out of existence.
Develop that a little bit more in terms of ESG, not the political piece of it, but I hear what you're saying, of course. But ESG, so for people that are still trying to grapple with its impact, Yeah, hey, it's BlackRock's doing great, and in my position in BlackRock is doing great too. So what do I care about ESG? What is the impact on the economy and on the direction of our economy?
Well, the first impact, Dan, is a huge misallocation of resources. We should not be pursuing EVs with lithium batteries. That's a total waste of time. It's a retrograde technology that Edison and Ford discarded 100 years ago when Edison said, no, use gasoline. And batteries haven't changed. The motors are more efficient, the electronics are more efficient. And keep in mind, the whole efficiency of electric comes from the motors. So if I have to go out and use coal or some other unsustainable source to produce electricity to charge my batteries, then what have I accomplished?
Right.
There are a lot of internal combustion engines out there that are so efficient now that you might ask yourself, why are we using electric for these applications, especially trucks? I mean, you would never use a battery to move a truck around, but we do. Elon Musk built one just so he could show it to us. But we live in this aspirational age, the age of idiocy, I call it, where we see things we want to do, but the technology doesn't support it yet. We don't have sustainability in this country. We can't run the country on solar panels. We just don't have the technology yet. But the politicians have decided to kidnap the narrative and take us to this fantasy land, right? It's going to cost a lot of money. Wait till people are sitting in California in the summertime in the dark because they don't have enough load to keep the grid up.
Well, there's
That's
also
gonna be fun.
there's not enough charging stations. I mean, recently
but that's
traveled, and there was
trivial.
people that were lined up to charge their vehicle overnight while they slept, but they were us out of luck because there was not enough.
Yeah, well, there's
They didn't plan for
$360
this.
billion dollars in the Inflation Reduction Act to fix that. But the question
they
is,
better hurry.
what if there were enough charging stations? Is that a good outcome?
No, the cost would be prohibitive. And remember, you have to take care of them. It's
Right.
not just building the charging station. You have to maintain it. You have to make sure it's working, that 220 line is not going to kill somebody. Little trivial things like that, right? So we don't have nearly enough commitment in the U.S. or other nations to charge batteries on a large scale. And remember, when we had COVID and everybody's behavior pattern changed and they were working from home, a lot of states had to tell people, don't charge your car during the day because you're going to take the grid down. If you put too much load on the grid and it drops down below 50 cycles, it stops working. It's a binary thing, yes or no, right? So we have to accommodate that now. And you've seen both the telephone company and the electric company have to rebalance their resources in order to accommodate the fact that half the people are staying home and working.
Well, Chris Whalen, I have some good news for you on the energy front, and it came from Al Gore at the World Economic Forum yesterday. Take a listen to Al Gore address some of the concerns you're raising.
If you look at all the new electricity generation installed worldwide, 90% of it was renewable. It's now the cheapest source of electricity in almost the entire planet. Secondly, electric vehicles for the transportation sector. The penetration has reached the 10% level in multiple geographies. That's the point where you often see an inflection going much higher. Norway's already at 50%. All the automakers are going in that direction. Business is leading. Andrew and Mark, of course, are two wonderful examples. There are many others. And in the WEF this year, I have noticed a huge increase in the amount of passion and attention being paid by CEOs and other business leaders. It is for real. But as the Secretary General said in his brilliant speech earlier today, we are not winning. The crisis is still getting worse.
But we are coming together, the corporate world coming together with visionaries like Al Gore, and we're getting there. So you can stop underwriting those coal mines now, Chris.
No. Look, we live in a strange time. It's very similar to the 1920s. I don't think people spend nearly enough time pondering the similarities in these two periods. both of which followed major events, World War One in the last century and COVID in this century. And people are confused, and they listen to people like Al Gore, and they think, oh, he's hopeful. But the reality is that no, 10% utilization of EVs just means that we've misallocated enough resources to build enough cars with lithium batteries and sell them to credulous people who will have to replace those cars and those batteries at very, very substantial cost. I think it's a shame. Years from now, we're going to look back on this period, Dan, and just shake our head and say, what in the world were we taking? What are they putting in the water, Dan? Maybe you can shed some light on that.
I don't know. Maybe not enough fluoride, too much fluoride. I'm not sure.
But if we had Henry Ford sitting here, he would be laughing at us. If we had Edison sitting here with us this morning, he would be laughing at us for our foolishness and our ignorance of science. And that's the problem with Al Gore. He's just a cheerleader.
Well, at best, he's a cheerleader. At worst, he's something much more nefarious. But here's the thing, too, since the topic is energy. I mean, this is what is in part, along with food, when the two are connected, of course, what is really putting a crimp in household budgets and expects to do so for some time, despite the inflation ticking down.
Well, you want to solve the Larry Fink problem and all these other big organizations. We need a Republican who takes antitrust to heart, not as a consumer issue, which, has cheapened it and belittled it, but as a political issue. When you have somebody with a company as big as BlackRock run by somebody like Larry Fink, you need to break it up. That's the answer. All of these large corporations that have gotten too big to govern and start to affect politics, right? That's the issue.
I mean, I suppose, sort of philosophically, I recoil at that. But the only other alternative, it seems to me, would be to vastly reduce the size and scope and expanse of government so that people like Larry Fink couldn't be so effective and build such empires through so much rent seeking. But as long as there's all of this government money sloshing around, there's going to be that a level of rent seeking that we see.
No, but listen, humans tend to move to aggregation. They don't like free markets. Humans like rigged markets. They like things like crypto, which is a rigged market, right? They're not interested in competition. So it takes force and it takes will to keep your markets diverse, to keep a large number of participants. And if somebody tries to aggregate them and consolidate them to the point where there is no competition effectively, then you break them up. You use the Sherman Act. It's a big hammer, but it's a good hammer.
But BlackRock is not without competition, for example.
No, but they're so big that they can affect markets. They're so big that they can destroy value for their clients and then just put them in another strategy next year. And say, oops, I'm sorry, because once Larry's got your money, the odds are he's going to keep it. You know what I mean? It's sticky.
Yeah.
It doesn't go anywhere. So these guys are no different than the trusts of a century ago. They just look different, but they have the same political power. And that's the thing that conservatives need to embrace. I think a libertarian conservative populist that's not run necessarily by a former real estate developer from New York, could work if it was enlightened instead of being crazy. I'm a big TR fan. Teddy's still my favorite president. What can I say?
All right. You're going to resuscitate the Bull Moose Party, are you, out there?
Well, when you're in New York, we will go to Keen's Chop House, and I will show you the Bull Moose Room.
I would love that. Very good.
It sounds like a date.
Yeah.
Maybe I could come along and
chaperone. Then we go watch the Rangers.
Yes.
No, there we go. The only reason to go to New York City is to watch hockey.
Well,
I don't know about that.
as long as we have our LGBTQ plus jerseys on
And our stick.
Oh, yeah. Please. Yeah. Hey, our mayor is becoming a conservative hero compared to the rest of this crowd.
Yeah, I hear there's no more room at the inn for migrants for coming across the southern border in New York City, according to Eric Adams, right?
Listen, we should be taking people out of New York and resettling them into other communities where they can find decent housing. That's the reality.
Okay.
New York is like London in the 16th century. We need to redevelop lots of it. Just bulldoze it.
It smells
All
the
those
same,
old
too. Yeah.
the office buildings on the east side. What are we going to do with them? Look at 3rd Avenue from the 30s up into the 60s. What are we going to do with all those buildings that are empty? Skate park. We could have the largest Westie training center, little steeplechase for small dogs. What are we going to do with all this space that's underutilized?
Like
So on the one hand, we
lost for gamers?
misallocate. No, but think about it. We misallocate resources to things that don't matter, and then we don't build decent housing for our citizens. What's that about? There's no way to make New York affordable. It's like Chicago. How do you make Chicago affordable with the political structure? You can't.
He is Christopher Whalen, investment banker, chairman of Whalen Global Advisors, author of Ford Men, From Inspiration to Enterprise, and editor for the Institutional Risk Analyst. Christopher Whalen, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Have a great day.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is the morning show more Chicago radio listeners are choosing. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
The following is a paid political announcement.
Why not Willie Wilson for mayor of Chicago? The criminals won't like Willie Wilson in the mayor's office. Fighting crime is Willie Wilson's first priority. The city isn't safe. The city streets, the CTA, are not safe.